remember driving down the Holloway Road and hearing the reporter talk about this new club opening called Ministry of Sound. It's harder actually to say no to opportunities than it is to say yes. We built the biggest independent record label in the world. What's the difference between bronzer and blusher again? I didn't fundamentally understand the product. I find that most businesses or organisations, however big or small they are metaphors for the people that own them. A creative director with a glorified title of a CEO.
Hi, I'm Duncan Kreeger. This is Tab University. So I've been doing this podcast for some time in various different formats. The main themes here are business, property, and positive thinking. And they're the kind of things that I feel I know a lot about and I like, and always keen to meet good people, interesting people with interesting stories, which is what brings Mark along today. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but perhaps like a very high level introduction, Mark, and then I'll probably pepper you with questions, and everybody can kind of come on the journey of me meeting you properly, because we have met before, and seeing if we can unlock some of those stories.
Yeah. Right. So do you want me just to give you a 10-second tour of how I got this far?
That would be great.
So I think if my story was a book, it's got, the beginning's okay. The middle is like, oh my God, that's fucking exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm working on the ending at the moment.
Brilliant.
Trying my hardest. But, I left, without going too far back, left school 16 like everyone did in those days. Yeah. Didn't know a single person that went to university.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the greatest marketing scams of the 21st century is the conversion of polytechnics to university, because there were no Jewish parents sending their kids to a polytechnic.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, some bright spark said, you know what, let's call them all universities.
Yeah.
So now we've shackled our kids with 70, 50, 75 grand loans and life goes on.
Yeah.
But I went straight into property, but with a quirk. I was an agent, but I specialised in food businesses, so West End and City catering business agents.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the days, second generation Italians were kind of opening snack bars in London. And I did the Planet Hollywood deal in Leicester Square, Quaglino's in St James's, and a couple of really big restaurants after a few years. And then went from this small practice to Davis Coffer, now known as Davis Coffer Lions, who are kind of market leaders in that kind of leisure space. And while there, I also had, I really loved clubbing. I enjoyed the music. And it's so weird how I remember driving down the Holloway Road it would have been 1991, believe it or not, and hearing the reporter talk about this new club opening called Ministry of Sound, which piqued my interest, having kind of experienced the rave scene and kind of moved away from it as it kind of got a bit more shady. And I went to Ministry of Sound on its opening night. And then a year or so later, while I was at Davis & Coff, I got a phone call from James Palumbo, who's the owner of Ministry, who said, I'm looking for a Ministry of Sound bar, but do you know what Ministry of Sound is? And I was like, of course I know what Ministry of Sound is. I'm a punter, right?
Yeah.
6 weeks later, I think, I'd cashed in my Alpina C2.7. I know you'll know what that is.
Yeah.
Not sure if anyone else will. And was driving my brother's Mini Metro, moved from my Albemarle Street offices with my sexy secretary to working out the back of a railway arch in Elephant and Castle.
Yeah.
And then this kind of 12-year journey started at Ministry of Sound, which we can talk about. But I went from Ministry, scratching my head, wondering what to do next. A great friend of mine who I was working with at Davis & Coffer had bought the Earls Court and Olympia sites. So I joined the board of that company, again with a spin on me doing events. That got sold to Capital and Counties. Then started a cosmetics business, which sounds weird, but that's the family business. I'm a creative person.
Yeah.
Had an idea for a brand. I managed to sell that after a few years to Saudi Arabian retail group, as you do.
Yeah.
And now I'm building care homes. So where the thread is in all of that, I don't know, but maybe we can
it's super interesting. And I guess real estate obviously has been a thread from the beginning. And having left school early as well, I kind of say to people, one thing I always really liked, I like buildings, physical space. I think the creative side, um, is a bit unusual. It doesn't necessarily go hand in hand. So is the creative side more prevalent, or is the love of property?
I think I'd extend it, because the thing about being creative is it's both a superb attribute, but it's also a terrible Achilles heel, because you can come up with fabulous ideas, but also it keeps you awake at night because your mind goes off in 74 different directions trying to navigate the best one. So it can kind of hold you back as well.
How invested are you in AI and all the new tools?
Massively.
Because for that sort of creative brain, being able to take things to another level, the next level and the next level before you've told anyone about it or spoken about it out loud, is quite interesting.
I probably spend most of my spare time and quite a large part of my work time involved in AI related
me too.
projects of some form. It's weirdly addictive and kind of irresistible. But I think the creative side, whether it's the application of creative skills to getting a negotiation done, or fundamentally, I like to start with nothing and see what I can build. So give me a hole in the ground, give me the germ of an idea, and I'm kind of there.
It sounds like as well you've gravitated towards good people or good businesses that you believed in as well. So that's, as you said, partly.
Yes, I mean, it's always, it's not too cliched to say.
But like, how did I get into this situation? You literally put yourself in some of those situations.
Yeah, I mean, I've got busy in the right spaces. Good people is, I can give you a list of bad ones as well.
Sure.
But, I think when I look back at my time at Ministry of Sound, which was so pioneering for its time, and we were involved in so many different media segments, that I learned an enormous amount. But, often I think I learned as well that with so many opportunities, it's quite important in business. It's harder actually to say no to opportunities than it is to say yes.
Yeah, I definitely feel that.
We've all got our catalogue of things that didn't work.
Yeah.
And the lessons from them are enormous. And frankly, until you've been through a few, I wonder whether you can.
Yeah, I mean, I said to you earlier when you asked me how things are, that there's lots of good things and some things we wish we hadn't done. And then I think, making the same mistakes is kind of unforgivable.
Yeah.
I'm the only shareholder or the main shareholder in the business, if you like. And so it's only myself I have to answer to. It's not like. So let's go back a bit to the first job in property and then landing those first few deals that you still remember now that kind of started to define your career. Is there something you can put your finger on that makes you think, why did the new kid land those deals when there are people in those businesses that had been trying to do those deals their whole career, or part luck, part judgment?
I think before I'll answer it, I'd probably say two things. First of all, you talk about your own business, and one of the things I've learned over the years, and I think this is right, and maybe anyone listening or watching can test it for themselves, is I find that most businesses or organizations, however big or small they are metaphors for the people that own them. So maybe without you realizing Tab's madness and craziness and its kind of Machiavellian attitude.
Yeah.
I wonder where that would emanate from.
No, I think that's kind of obvious, really. It's,
the other thing I found at Ministry, when we started to release compilation albums, we had one particular year where we started this series called The Annual, which was a review of the year in Clubland. And traditionally, now that's what I call music's album that had always been number one at Christmas. And we were, a South London nightclub. We managed to persuade major record labels to license us tracks to make this compilation. And talking about, Ministry, probably in those days, was probably turning over, a couple of £1 million a year. We sold 680,000 copies of The Annual at a dealer price of £10 each in the space of about 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So it completely transformed the business.
It's a different business. Yeah, for sure.
One of the things that I probably started to learn when I was first in property, working for that small agency selling little cafes and snack bars. And again, it's a lesson I give to my own kids, let alone anyone else will listen, is you often, when you go into business, and I hope this isn't too arrogant, you see bigger companies in your sector. I mean, you must have it in finance all the time. and you're kind of in awe of them. They have a mystique around them. You don't really know them that well, but you know of them. And you perceive them to be unbelievably well run with the best people. And you kind of start engaging with them, and you start to realize that actually, if you're prepared to work harder than them and be a bit more creative, there's no reason why you can't achieve the same.
Sure.
And so I think I learned quite early on to have a respect for organizations that pioneered or were bigger, but at the same time, there was no reason why they couldn't be emulated.
Would you say you learnt that early on, or that is just the way that you are made up? Because I can definitely relate to that, and I don't look at a business. I think one of the first conversations about business my dad sort of recalls having with me when I said, well, I want to start a lending business, and I said, well, how did Halifax start?
Yeah.
Because that was the lender I knew at the time
Yeah.
who did mortgages, and he said, well, they're a bank, they've been around for 100 years. I said, yeah, but how did they start?
Yeah.
Because to me it's like, well, it's not untouchable. Okay,
Yeah.
it's a big question, but I think it's kind of built into you a little bit.
I think you've got to have some front, and I think you've got to have the confidence. We built at Ministry the biggest independent record label in the world, with actually very few artists signed, and for a long time, absolutely none at all. So we were wholly reliant on major record labels licensing records to us to release compilations, with the great irony being that the value built from that was ultimately sold to Sony Records, without whom we couldn't have got to that point in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that's quite common, isn't it? That you encroach somebody else's space, and then you need each other really to be, they just need to be. So let's talk about Ministry, because that's clearly, is that the crazy bit in the middle you described at the beginning? Does that extend maybe to Earls Court and some other big transactions?
I wish I could distill what it was that made Ministry of Sound so successful and well known. But occasionally you can have the best business brains and the best consultants in the world, but you just can't create business plans for these things. So culturally, I think it was at a particular moment, and there's only been maybe 2 or 3 of these ever in youth culture, where a new drug and a new music comes along simultaneously and captures the imagination. So we just happened to be around that space, around that time. So it was a phenomenon of every sense. But there used to be, every year at Earls Court, before I worked there was a trade show, Plaza, the Professional Light and Sound Association, which is basically a load of black boxes. Some make sound, some have got wiggly lights in them.
Yeah.
But this is where the industry would come together to buy new boxes that make sound and wiggly lights. And they would have their show party at Ministry of Sound. And, in those days, it was very difficult to get into Ministry. So you had a load of really bad club owners from all over the UK descending on Ministry of Sound in the most terrible suits.
Yeah.
And they would kind of walk in with their notepads thinking, right, we're going to Ministry of Sound.
Yeah, this is our opportunity.
We're going to copy it. But when you've walked into a disused bus shelter in South London, and they're kind of scratching their heads thinking, hang on a minute, I've got nice carpet with zigzags on, lots of, why can't we emulate this? But
one thing I've learned in my career is timing is everything. And even if all of the stars align, you still need to take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of you. That's not to say skills aren't transferable, as I'm sure you've learned in the many different businesses you've been involved with afterwards, because obviously those lessons are important, and at the margin, all those things make a difference. But when you're in the right place at the right time, and you're minded to seize the moment, I think that can be kind of magical and hard to recreate. Let's say when you arrived at Ministry, it wasn't long after it had formed.
So it had been open a year.
And it was basically at that point, by the sounds of it, a nightclub, or to use your words, a disused bus shelter in Elephant and Castle.
Simon Moore, who's a well-known creative director who became the creative director at Ministry, has actually spent the last 2.5 years putting the book together of Ministry of Sound.
Yeah.
It's 450 pages. It's out in the next couple of months. And he's collected together all of the stories. In fact, just before we came in, your colleague was saying, I remember the Benny Benassi video, and I came to Ministry of Sound to meet you, and you had just launched it. Everyone's got their own story. So he's compiled all those stories together.
And they're kind of lost otherwise, because we didn't have phones pointing around in every corner at every event, every show, and a lot of that stuff probably better it wasn't recorded.
What suited me at Ministry, and again, this is a nice piece of post-rationalisation, is it was genuinely a time where the business was run by creative thinking. And to James's credit, and subsequent Lohan, who took over as CEO, were and still are far more disciplined business people than I ever was. I was just full of new ideas. And so for many years, for that 10 years, it was about what's the new latest and greatest ideas, whether it was an album concept or a club night or a radio station or a magazine or what have you. But I think by the time I left, I was about 35, and I remember the club promotions team coming to see me, average age probably 20, saying, "Right, Mark, here's the flyers for the next month." I remember I had something to say, and eyes started rolling.
Yeah.
I thought, you know what? Now is the time.
So there was no property angle at all then, having earned, I guess, your initial stripes in letting restaurants.
Only from a personal perspective of, buying and selling and investing. Club was in Elephant and Castle, and I go there now.
Yeah.
And it's just skyscraper after skyscraper.
I mean, talk about areas.
There were car parks that we were renting for people to dump their cars in at night.
Sure.
That so with like everyone with hindsight, we
would have been a nice place to.
Yeah. But no, I disengaged from property at that point.
And your role was very, as in, you've said you sort of ideas and trying to see things through, but did you have a role? How big did the team get? Were you managing other people?
I was a creative director with a glorified title of a CEO.
Yeah.
James was chairman. By the time I left, there were probably about 250 staff, 2 or 3 offices around the world. I think we had a nightclub in Bangkok. We were about to open in Singapore. We had a magazine publishing business, radio shows, a touring business sponsored by Pepsi. So we had transcended into the mainstream, which itself was always a struggle for how we would balance. How do you present yourselves as being cool and underground, available?
Doing a deal with
advertising
Pepsi.
your albums on telly on a Friday night.
Yeah,
so
sure.
that was always the challenge and the struggle. And then, fun enough, when I left, I actually struggled to distill what it was I was actually good at.
Yeah.
Because I think, when you move on in your career, you're kind of looking to move to a similar company in a similar space. Where there weren't many nightclub organizations with a record label and a publishing company. There wasn't really a list of goals. So I was a wandering sheep for a bit before Anthony, my friend who bought Earls Court, called me and said, "Look, I'm about to buy this business. It's got 700 staff. I've only ever managed a PA. I've never really done that well. Do you want to come along and help?" And hence my move into that.
So, because I think people, and I talk about this probably a bit too often, but I think people believe they're indispensable. And it sounds like you, having been in the business so long and it changing, I guess one of the reasons why you didn't know exactly what you were good at is because you were always doing something new. Lots of new things that you didn't know you could do before. And maybe it's more like, which bits did you like rather than...
Yeah.
And as I said, those are transferable. But then tell me about that time when you left. It's kind of, you get quite emotionally attached, I think, to businesses after that period of time, or did it not feel like that?
Well, the number plate on my car is 50UND.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Still. So I still to this day have an emotional attachment to Ministry. I'm very fond of it.
Yeah.
They were my formative years in terms of my business experience.
Do you have any sort of involvement at all in...
No, I speak to Lohan every now and again.
Yeah.
He's the CEO now. Their business has moved on because they've got the nightclub now, having sold the record label. Nightclub's 35 years old next month, actually, in September.
And as we discussed before, there's some creative studios there, and they're doing some other
and they've
stuff.
they've gone into the serviced office business. They've got a really successful space in Borough, which is it's WeWork for cool people.
It's under the bridge. Is it under a bridge?
That's where the club is, and the offices are just around the corner.
Yeah,
and doing really well. So, yeah, it's a big part of.
So when you left, what did you think about what would happen there?
Well, I thought this is great because loads of people have got my phone number. So if I just sit back and go on a long holiday, they're going to call.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for the call. But I think the transition into Earls Court, where I ended up doing events, was kind of okay. But it's only when I look back now, I'm basically an ideas person, which is why you talk about AI and kind of what we're probably both scheming on at the moment, because all of a sudden the hurdles that existed between having a random idea at 3 a.m. and actually bringing it to fruition have absolutely dissipated. They are no longer there. So I was an ideas person to the extent that while at Earls Court, so my dad and my brother are in the cosmetics business. So it was always,
So what did you do? We'll come on to the cosmetics. Tell me about Earls Court, because from the outside, I've seen that real estate go through complete transformation. It was quite newsworthy deal as well. Were you more on the business side or the property side?
I would have loved to have been on the actual property deal side, because it was so clever, because they took an operational company. I'm guessing the numbers, say making a 20 million EBITDA.
Yeah.
They converted it overnight into an operational company only making 10 million EBITDA, but on a 5 times multiple. But set up a property company and paid it £10 million a year rent on a 20 times rent. So overnight, its value was substantially increased just by looking at it in a different way, in a kind of propco.
And that was post.
That wasn't my doing. But so the reason I went there is I just saw these very, very large venues that during the summer.
You wanted to turn it into a nightclub, didn't you?
That was the secret agenda. But during the summer and during the winter, they weren't used. So I went in with an event spin, and I brought over to the UK the Bodies exhibition, which is kind of mummified real bodies, which was hugely successful. Did one of those famous Christmas events that ends up in the Daily Mail. Okay, one of those?
Yeah, fine.
Which went completely wrong. I'm still licking my wounds from that one. But we did a series of really good events over a couple of years, some of which we managed to sell and move on. But it was a fun time, because I was watching some really good friends of mine who are operating it kind of work the property angle of it. Sure. So they merged the Earls Court and Olympia Group together. They bought the old Whitbread brewery in Chiswell Street. There was this ludicrous thing. Again, it was a genius move where on Brompton Road, where property prices are not insignificant, there was this ridiculous system where for 50 or 70 years that Earls Court had been open, if you're a truck pulling up for a venue, you went and parked in this giant car park in Brompton Road and waited to be called in. And it didn't take too long to think, well, hang on a minute. Rather than wait in Brompton Road, why don't they wait on our site and we'll tell people what time their trucks can arrive, which of course we did. It took about 10 minutes to realise actually the car park in Brompton Road is worth several tens, if not hundreds of millions, which it was, and got sold for resi. So they worked, the guys behind that bought an operational business from people who are obsessed with the exhibition business, but fundamentally were looking at the property assets, backed by Investec, and managed to make a shed load of money out of it.
Yeah, sure.
But by the way, I always used to say, if you went to any of Anthony's houses around the world as a result of that deal, the music was shit. If you came to my flat, I had a fucking CD collection.
Yeah. Do you still have it?
No, actually.
Yeah.
No, long gone. All digital.
Yeah, no, it's weird. But you've still got it. Yeah. You just don't have the old playlists. And I'm driving an old car at the moment. It's got a CD player. And I found, as much as I don't have anymore, but I found some CDs that I'd made in like very early 2000s. So trying to explain to my kids.
You weren't DJ Duncan, were you?
No, I wasn't. I'm not part of PJ and Duncan either. Just trying to explain to them what's on it. It moves so fast. Technology moves fast. We talk about AI. It moves so fast. But then what I was going to say is it's being the sort of ideas guy, but also having gained so much experience. Do you feel like you can, those quick wins that you just talked about, the car park, and why doesn't someone, it's just a fresh perspective on something that's worked and been done for so long. I think that's a kind of underused skill. It's like, why would I run I've got my little AI project. I've been building something. You at a certain point, you want to say, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
And are you that guy that people do that to?
For some reason, people come to me for advice, but
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to give it.
Sure.
Much more difficult to act on the advice that you're giving.
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, but you know what? When people come to me with ideas, one of the first things I say is the world actually isn't short of good ideas.
Yeah,
it's short of good people. And just turning up saying, I've got this idea for an app or a project. Here it is. It's like, well, okay, what are you doing Monday to Friday?
Yeah, what are you going to do about it?
There's a no. Well, like I was thinking, I was going to find someone to do it, and the reality is, you got to find the people.
Yeah, no, I hear that all the time. Worse is I've got an idea, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet. Yeah. It's but yeah, and I think look, we're probably both the type of people who'd say, well, let's do it then. If it's a good idea, what are you waiting for? On that theme of timing.
Better done than perfect.
Yeah, and also if it doesn't work, you want to find out sooner rather than later. So at what point what was the natural ending to the Earls Court? How did that come to an end?
They sold the business.
Yeah.
Well, they sold the properties to Capital and Counties. It's probably one of the biggest residential development schemes in London. Olympia got bought separately, I think is about to or has recently opened as well as a new entertainment venue.
Yeah.
Which will be interesting. But while I was there, sitting on the loo one day reading my wife's Vogue magazine.
Yeah.
Turning the pages, and it said, dress by Gucci, necklace models own, next page. Bag by Fendi, blouse models own. I was thinking it's interesting, this models own concept. That would actually be a really good brand name because it's kind of out there. People see it all the time. I got friendly with Kate, who's our trademark lawyer at Ministry of Sound, and I called Kate from the loo and said, tap models own into your computer. Taps in, said, no, it's never been registered. I said, register it now for cosmetics class 3. And kind of forgot about it.
So what was it describing models own?
It's as in it's the models own items. So they bought it to the shoot.
I understood.
And the more I looked through fashion magazines,
it was more.
The more I would see invariably on a lot of shoots, there'd be something belong to the model, and it was referred to as models own.
Fine.
I think there was a record label called Junior Boys Own.
Yeah.
Which was named after a comic that was out in the 30s. So I think that probably resonated a little bit. And then my brother Stephen was telling me one day how nail polish had become really popular. And he said, I'm thinking of focusing on it because out of all the cosmetic products you can make, nail polish is the easiest. I won't bore you with why.
Yeah.
I said, well, I've got this brand name, Models Own.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good name. So we put a logo together and all of a sudden we were in business.
Yeah.
We had a brand name called Models Own. And my dad said to us, guys, this is a really good idea, but unless you can get in Boots or Superdrug, there's just no business in the UK. And you talk about timing.
Yeah.
I'd met these two girls who had a business whose job it was to take new products into Boots. Took us into Boots. And it just so happened Boots were like doing their 5-year refresh planning. They said, love the name. It's great. You've got 4 weeks to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we found ourselves in Boots with this cosmetics brand. And then my creativity got completely carried away but also my brand skills, because I realized that I couldn't rely on a third-party retailer to portray the brand how I wanted. So we wanted our own retail stores, didn't want to pay the money. So we created this 10-meter long giant nail polish bottle that became a shop. And we had 25 of them in shopping centres around the UK.
Like a concession.
Yeah, it was, and I thought,
what you'd call a pop-up now.
Yes, but you see all these things and it's, it's some counters and a bloke selling olives. So we put proper retail design spend into these kiosks and they became very well known. And I had a phone call after a few years from a guy who said, I represent a Saudi Arabian retail group. Do you want a franchise? I'd just fallen out with Boots. We'd had a big fallout and I thought, shit, there's 75%.
Why did you fall out?
Because I kept going into stores and our displays, which were quite large, looked like a train had hit them.
Yeah.
I felt that Boots had a disregard for small suppliers.
Were they selling well?
They
Or was it coming from why are we not selling as well? And then you saying this is the reason why.
When you look at all the brands in boots, certainly 7 or 8 years ago, most of them were owned by 2 or 3 companies in the cosmetic space. They have 250 women every week visiting stores, redisplaying the makeup, tidying the stands.
Yeah, fine.
When you're a small brand in 250 stores, you just can't do that.
Yeah.
So I was relying on the store, not just to keep my display stocked. You would think it's the job of the store manager, but it's not. So I wanted to rescue control back of the brand, which was precious to me. And we didn't see eye to eye. And I had this kind of out-of-body experience in the Boots boardroom, which my brother still reminds me about.
Kicks you about.
But there was no coming back from that one. And I remember driving down from Nottingham on the M1 thinking, 75% of the business. I just kicked it in the nuts, which is what pushed the retail strategy. So these guys in Saudi, who are one of these Middle Eastern retail groups who have got franchises for brand, all sorts of Western brands, ended up franchising and ultimately buying that business. Which
was the plan always to sell it, or what was the plan?
This is, I think, one of those.
It sounds like you were enjoying. Yeah, because if you build it to say,
but this is where from a creative perspective, I was like, I love the branding and I love the marketing. Oh my God, this looks amazing. The photo shoots are incredible. Again, in the same way I'd come up against major record labels, when you're speaking to L'Oreal's and Max Factors, and you're
going toe to toe,
you're like, oh my God, actually, I got up earlier in the morning. Yeah. I've had better ideas. Yeah. We're faster. Yeah. We're taking them on and we're in their space.
You like the thrill of that. I mean, you've talked about it a few times.
Yeah, I think there's some anti-establishment
part of your motivation.
Yeah. And, I was naughty at school. Yeah. That was the thing. So, but what I did with Model Zone, we thought it could become a full range makeup business, but it had become famous for nail polish. But because I was obsessed with the creative side, I would sit in meetings and say to this product team, it's like, sorry, what's the difference between bronzer and blusher again? Yeah. And that was one of the eye roll moments that I had at Ministry of Sound. Sure. And that was really, I didn't fundamentally understand the product. I love the creativity.
Love the brand.
That was the lesson. That was the lesson.
Yeah, fine.
If you don't love the product, you're always going to be restricted.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I had someone reach out to me yesterday, an old friend from school, just saying, I'm in this sales job and it's not what I thought it was, and there's no office, and I don't get to hang out with the business, and there's like a whole long list of things that we genuinely haven't spoken for a long time. And I just wrote back saying, it sounds like you don't love the product. And they said, you're absolutely right. I think the product's crap. So that's the problem. Yeah. If you I think because I care, if I really get the product and I really like it, I find it easy to sell. I can talk about it all day. I'm happy to be sort of pushed on it. But if you don't love it, it's really hard to sell.
People say it often, if you can find something you like and turn it into a job, boy, does it make life easier.
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely what I tried to talk to my kids about. I don't think I came from that era. The era was more get a job and look after yourself, and look after your family. And, sometimes I think about, I didn't sort of grow up wanting to lend money secured on property. I love building the business. I love the brand. I love the people. I like growing stuff. And even the bits you get wrong, I find super interesting. I'm up for the challenge. Yeah. But I guess it's an era, especially with AI. And if that continues to go on the way that it's going, it could really transform the way that, people earn money and spend money.
Have you seen Pulsea, by the way?
No.
So Pulsea, which is slop AI backwards.
Yeah. Okay.
So this guy started Pulsea probably a year ago, 15 months ago. He's taken vibe coding onto the next level. So you can go into Pulsea, as I know you will today now, I've mentioned it, because you can't resist it.
Yeah.
You can describe the idea you want, again, like vibe coding, but it then runs the entire business for you. So it builds the website, does your tweets, does your advertising, does your marketing, does your URL, sets up your payments, recommends what you should and shouldn't do, and effectively runs the business for you.
Yeah.
And I think there's now 20,000 signups. He spent last month alone $1.2 million on the AI space that he's using.
Yeah.
And everyone else is paying him on top of that.
Yeah, sure.
And that is, I mean, I used to sit with 2 graphic designers and a creative director to come up with a new campaign, let alone a photo shoot and models. And at the moment, our intellectual property hasn't been grabbed by AI. I'd like to think we've still got some time left, but I don't think we need graphic designers anymore or creative directors. There's a 1973 Led Zeppelin album, I forget the name, but Hypnosis, who were the famous agency in those days, took child models, climbed a mountain and got a photo shoot.
Yeah.
I forget the detail of it, but it was arduous and it took time and it was ludicrously expensive. In the same way, at Ministry of Sound, we had a campaign. We took the Technics SL1210 decks, and we would style them. And we did one that was, in a block of ice on the beach in Ibiza.
Yeah.
It took 5 days to freeze it.
Yeah.
We had to rent a villa in Ibiza with a freezer.
Yeah.
We had to get the tanks over. We had to get it. I mean,
get the perfect shot for it. Yeah.
That's a prompt. Now.
Yeah. It's a click of a button.
That's
and then you
$20
can get 1,000
a month.
different angles, and in every country all over the world, and bigger, smaller. Yeah.
So it's an interesting time. And when I was at Davidson,
the ideas become the most important part.
The intellectual property.
Yeah.
That's where the value is.
Sure.
So hopefully we can hang on to that for a few years. I remember at Davison Coffer, so I started there in 1993, 16 Albemarle Street, would walk up to the first floor reception. There were 14 girls typing.
Yeah, sure.
And there were 15 blokes selling. We would have our little dictaphones.
Yeah.
And they'd come around once an hour, take your tape, give you back your thing in the post. Economists must have worked out at some point, hang on a minute.
And then fucking post them, and they'd wait 3 days, 4 days, 5 days to get your offer.
Yeah, even before fax machines.
Yeah.
So, but those women are now working.
Yeah.
Explaining to my daughter now, who's 20, that there was a time when actually the whole concept of you working or pioneering was irrelevant.
Yeah.
Economists have worked out that there's 50% of the population that could ultimately go out to work, earn money and pay tax. And those 14 secretaries, they're not unemployed. They're doing other stuff.
Doing something different, yeah.
The challenge with AI is it, so email replace those secretaries. So how many people does AI replace? And do they get to do other stuff?
Yeah.
Or are they just unemployed?
And it's coming much, much quicker. Like that, there was a pretty, I known people who worked for banks before there was emails, and then emails came. They change, you sort of catch up quite quickly. Now it's the whole business is live before I get out of bed the next day. Like you just described Pulsio, which I'll go and have a look at. And I've probably built 20 or 30 different websites on Lovable. I spend my life on Claude. I love new model release day. It's like my favorite day of the week now. It used to be the month.
Yeah.
I know James, who sits behind the glasses, obsessed as well. And then I think what's interesting to me though is that there's still a lot of people that aren't. Surprising amount of people
there is
who are like, well, it makes mistakes, and it's like people you just know haven't invested the time in it. What I like is that I'm trying. I'm trying stuff and I'm learning about it, and it's not necessarily at the end yet, but as the models get better and your ideas get better and your prompting gets better, I know what I want out, so I know what to put in. And we're so early. We're on model like 5. It's exciting to me.
I've just finished a piece of software on Lovable. I did a search on our accountant's name and the word invoice. In the last 18 months, 1,500 emails have gone backwards and forwards between 4 people to to approve invoices.
Yeah.
I spent probably 350 quid on Lovable tokens.
Yeah.
A lot of time, I'm guessing 50 hours,
Yeah.
to write a piece of software that allows the invoices to be dragged in once and an approval process to start. The rest of the organization has got no idea how that happened or how it was written. Has got no idea whether it cost £2 or £222,000. So you're right, the opportunity exists because a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
And if you're 18 years old and listening to this and learn how to use Lovable, I just watched a YouTube video, actually. A guy's earning $200,000 a month. He's got a team of people using Lovable, selling software into businesses that don't know what Lovable is or just don't have the skill or the intellectual property. So there's still a huge opportunity.
Yeah, there is. And then there's, like his SaaS isn't really what it used to be. Like selling I think the edge for me feels like build stuff really good for us that makes our business better.
Yes.
And then is it useful for other businesses? Yes. But do I want to go in and build an invoice tracking software?
Not for someone else. No.
It's because you've got this challenge. You've got the knowledge. So you don't have to give the knowledge. You don't have to get the message across to a whole team that can then go and try and deliver what you're trying to do. You can just get there yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. So you sold the business. You sold the cosmetics business.
Yeah.
And was that, I was sort of assuming that was a very good day.
When you sell a business, obviously the big question is, what do you do next? Unless you're going to absolutely smash it out the park and never work again, all you end up doing is moving the sliders up on Rightmove and Auto Trader.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you end up with more cars,
Yeah.
but with more lease payments,
Yeah.
and bigger mortgages. Yeah. It sounds great in theory, but it can shackle you at the same time.
Especially if your ideas as well, and
because you can't stop.
Money to try doing things, and you get to a point where it's like, well, I've got a certain amount of time trying before I have to go and get a job again or do something. But you've slipped back to property a lot, and I want to kind of talk about property a bit, because I guess, has that been the sensible side to the toys and the ideas? Maybe talk to me about that a bit.
I think once you've got the property bug, once you can see what can be done, once you can appreciate that someone can be sitting on an asset they think is worth X, and at your first glance it's worth 3X. When you can get involved creatively on what it looks like or feels like, when you're challenged with a complicated deal that most people would walk away from, when you're having to use charm and charisma and negotiating skills to get what you want, it's very intoxicating.
Yeah.
We're worn down by a very bureaucratic planning system and a conveyancing system. But ultimately, I'm not surprised I came back to property, because other than crypto or being a city boy earning huge bonuses, there are very few industries that have such a great effort, as great an effort return ratio as a decent property deal.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it's difficult now.
Very much so.
It's
very much so. I mean, I used to spend 90% of my time looking for property, 10% of my time worrying about planning, and that's done a complete 180. My days are consumed with planning and bureaucracy, and a system that has been worn down by civil servants over many years and is at breaking point, but unfortunately will need to break before it's fixed, I suspect.
I do want to talk a bit about marketing, actually, because I think we talked about common threads, and you've talked about quite a lot, but also the actual love of, how it looks and how important it is to you. And I think in an age where you can create a logo, and we released a mixed use mortgage index, mixed use mortgage monitor yesterday. And I just sort of went down a rabbit hole of designing logos and infographics and AI slot, which came up for a different reason. But And it's not just the logo; it's kind of everything that goes around them. And give me some thoughts on just marketing generally. Like, it sounds like you said some interesting.
Yeah, I think when I was still at school, I say club promoter. It was three of us, and we'd rent a local bar and charge people £5. And I think very early on, I had an appreciation for the best marketeers have an inherent ability to put themselves in the shoes of their end users. And we used to do these marketing conferences at Ministry where brands would turn up, youth marketeers. So the people at big brands who are charged with selling to young people, who would come to Ministry of Sound to listen about marketing. But, they were 50 years old.
Yeah.
And I think unless you can really understand and behave like your end user, I think it becomes very difficult. I also learned that the job of a good promoter, and I would extend that into the job of a good marketeer, is to disregard market research and surveys. And you've got to try and give people what they want, but they just don't know it yet. So you can't actually ask them that question.
Yeah.
They just don't know.
They don't know the answer.
They don't know the answer.
Tell you.
That for me is, if you can understand passionately your end user, you can sell great products to them. But if you've got to read a manual or understand the survey or the market research, I think it's always a struggle.
Thank you very much, Mark. I've really, really enjoyed meeting you properly.
Likewise.
I'm sure we'll carry on the conversation elsewhere. So thank you very much. That brings us to a close.